Kingdoms in the Deccan and South India. Objectives. After reading this unit, you will be able to learn about the kingdoms that arose in the Deccan and South India, with special reference to the Chalukyas of Badami and the Pallavas of Kanchi. The relations between these kingdoms, the role of geography in understanding the political history of our period, and how people were governed in these kingdoms. Introduction. People often speak of India south of the Vindhyas as South India or the Deccan. This division has been made for a long time. Indeed, as early as ancient India, when the area south of the Vindhyas was called the Dakshinapath or the Southern Territory. Dakshin became the Deccan or of medieval times, from which in turn the term Deccan is derived. But historians and geographers have found it more useful to distinguish the Deccan proper from the rest of the South India. The Deccan consists of Maharashtra and northern Karnataka, and as far as the double deltas of the Godavari and the Krishnas. Following this usage, we shall speak of the Deccan and South India as the two regions south of the Vindhyas, while the term Southern India will stand for both the regions and as distinct from Northern India. You will appreciate the value of these distinctions more and more as you go deeper into the study of history and society of this area. In Block 7, you have read about the political development which took place in the Deccan and South India in the Mauryan and the post-Mauryan period. You have noticed that while the Deccan was included in the Mauryan Empire, the major chiefdoms of South India, that is those of the Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas and Satyaputras, were friendly neighbors of the Mauryas. In the post-Maurya period, initially minor chiefs assuming the title of Raja or King appeared in the Deccan, and the Deccan was politically integrated by the Satavahanas, who called themselves Lords of the Deccan. In the south too, the chiefdoms were going through important changes, resulting in the emergence of state systems in the subsequent period. In this unit, you shall be reading about the political situation which developed in the Deccan from the post-Satavahana period, beginning of the 3rd century AD to the 8th century AD. Political situation in the Deccan till the mid-6th century AD. After the decline of the Satavahanas, the political control of the Deccan under one dynasty came to an end. A number of kingdoms arose in different regions as successors of the Satavahanas. In northern Maharashtra, we see the Abhiras, who for a time served as army commanders in the Saka kingdoms, founding a kingdom in the mid-3rd century AD. The founder of this line was one Ishwar Sen, who began an era in AD 248-49. This era became very important later and came to be known as Kalachuri Chedi era. Vidarbha Maharashtra. The Maharashtra plateau soon come to be dominated by the Vakatakas. They began as minor kings from the last quarter of the 3rd century AD, but rapidly gained in power and extended their sway over most of the Maharashtra and adjoining parts of Madhya Pradesh. There were two lines of Vakataka kings ruling in different areas. The main line ruled from eastern Maharashtra, the Vidarbha region, while a collateral branch called the Basin branch of the Vakatakas ruled in southern Maharashtra. The most famous Vakataka king was Pravar Sen, one of the main line, who alone had the title of Samrat among the Vakatakas. He performed several Vedic sacrifices and issued a large number of land grants to Brahmins. The Vakatakas seem to have been peace-loving people on the whole, and had formed matrimonial and diplomatic ties with their powerful neighbors, such as the Guptas in the north, the Vishnu Kundis in the eastern Deccan, and the Kadambas in the south. But the breakup and weakening of the kingdom could not be prevented, as the Kalachuris and the Kadambas carved out their territories at its cost in the first half of the 6th century AD. By the mid-6th century, they were supplanted by the Chalukyas of Badami as the major power in the Deccan. Karnataka. In the coastal strip of the northern Karnataka, North Kannada, and adjoining areas, a small kingdom was carved out by the Chuttus. They ruled till about the mid-4th century AD, when they were supplanted by the Kadambas. This kingdom was founded by the famous Mayur Sharman, who was an expert in guerrilla warfare and compelled the Pallavas of Kanchi to recognize his sovereignty. He then performed horse sacrifices, Ashwamedh, and became Mayur Sarman from Mayur Varman from Mayur Sarman, that is, a Kshatriya from Brahman. Varman was a typical Kshatriya surname, while Sarman was a Brahman surname. Early in its history, there was a division of the Kadamba kingdom into two parts between the two lines of the family, with Vijayanti, Banvasi and Palasika, Halsi as the capitals. The two lines were never in peace with each other, and both were threatened by their more powerful neighbors, the Palwas, the Western Gangas, and above all, the Chalukyas of Badami. The Chalukyas gradually ate into their territory, and by about 575 AD, completely vanquished them. Eastern Deccan. Politically, the most disturbed region in the post-Satavahana Deccan was the fertile Krishna-Godavari Delta, Andhra Delta in the east. Here, the Satavahanas were succeeded by the Ikshvakus, who were in control of this region from 225 AD. There was a break in their rule by the coming of Abhiras from the west, but it was a brief interregnum, and the Ikshvakus came back and ruled for the next 50 years or so. Then the area was apparently split up into a number of principalities. From copper plate inscriptions, we came to know of the kings of Brihat Phalayan Gotra, followed by those of Salankayan Gotra. While the Allahabad pillar inscription or the Prayag Prashasti, which praises Samudragupta, informs us about half a dozen kingdoms in this area about 350 AD. These include the kingdoms of Vengi of Kurala with capitals at Pishtapura and at Avamukha of Devarashtra and so on. Political stability returned to the Andhra Delta from the mid-5th century with the coming of the Vishnu Kundis. They had good relations with the Vakatakas, but had prolonged continued conflicts with the Western Gangas of South Karnataka. Madhavarman I, the founder of the line, who performed many horse sacrifices, and Madhavarman II are among the famous rulers of the line. The Vishnu Kundis ruled till about the first quarter of the 7th century AD when the Chalukyas came in. South Karnataka. In South Karnataka, there arose a dynasty at the beginning of the 5th century AD. The kings of this dynasty are called Gangas or Western Gangas to distinguish them from the Eastern Gangas of Odisha. The Western Gangas ruled over South Karnataka for the next 600 years. Because of such a long association, the area came to be called Gangavadi. Gangavadi is an isolated territory surrounded by mountains and is relatively less prosperous agriculturally. Both these factors allowed the Gangas to rule without much interference from outsiders for such a long time. They were, however, very advantageously situated from a military point of view. They were to play a very important role in the mutual conflicts between the Palwas and Chalukyas of Badami, mostly as subordinate allies of the latter, as well as in conflict between the Palwas and the Pandyas. They did not generally have cordial relations with the Palwas, who they were well placed to harass from their lofty mountain fortress of Nandidurg. Political situation in South India. The Sangam period in Tamil Nadu and Kerala drew to a close about the end of the 3rd century AD. The history of this area from the 4th to the mid 6th century AD is very obscure. The early history of the Palwas belong to this period. We have their copper plate charters that were issued from Kanchi. Pallava rule was traditionally assured with the Kanchi region, Pallava River Valley or Tondai Mandalam. Tondai is Tamil for Pallava. But it seems that during this period, the Kanchi region was not under their effective control, as they had been pushed north by mountainous tribes called Kalabharas. In fact, from the end of the Sangam period to the mid 6th century AD, Tamil Nadu and Kerala were dominated by the Kalabharas. We do not know much about them, but it has been inferred from this scanty evidence that they were against Brahminical institutions and favorably disposed towards Buddhism and Jainism. That they put an end to the rule of Cheras, Cholas and the Pandyas of the Sangam age, and that they were non-agricultural hill tribes who caused great havoc among a settled agricultural population. The Kalabhra threat seems to have extended to the borders of Chalukya kingdom, which emerged in the North Karnataka, for they too claim to have defeated them. This period is known as the Kalabhra interregnum. The rise of the Chalukyas, the Palwas and the Pandyas. From the mid 6th century AD, the political scene in the Deccan and the South India was dominated by the activities of three powers: the Chalukyas of Badami, the Palwas of Kanchi, and the Pandyas of Madura, the Pandyas of Madurai. The Chalukyas. The Chalukyas became a sovereign power with Pulakeshin I. He laid the foundation of his kingdom by making the hill near Badami in the Bijapur district of Karnataka into a strong fortress in 543 to 544 AD and performed a horse sacrifice. His successors overthrew the Kadambas and annexed their kingdom gradually, and also subjugated the Mauryas of Konkan, the coastal strip of Maharashtra. With the expeditions of Pulakeshin II, the Chalukyas became the paramount power in the Deccan, as the Vaishnav Gangas and the Alupas in the south and the Latas, Malavas and Gurjars in the north offered their submission to him. The army of Pulakeshin II checked the forces of Harshvardhan on the banks of Narmada. Pulakeshin II also defeated the Vishnu Kundis of Andhra Delta, but he was not satisfied with demanding just offers of submission, as the Krishna Godavari Delta, with almost 1 million acres of rich arable land, was too valuable a possession. So about 621 AD, he sent his younger brother Vishnuvardhan to consolidate the conquest and take over the area. In 631 AD, Vishnuvardhan was allowed to from his own kingdom. Thus began the line of the Chalukyas of Vengi, or Eastern Chalukyas, who remained in control of the area for more than 500 years. The Pallavas. The rise of the Pallavas began with Sima Vishnu. About the middle of the 6th century AD, he put an end to the Kalabra interregnum in Tandai Mandalam, Kanchi region, and extended his kingdom southward up to the Kaveri Delta. He was succeeded by Mahendravarman I, who annexed territories in the north up to the river Krishna. The Pallava kings also secured submission from the neighboring chieftains and kings, and thus reached the zone of influence of the Chalukyas of Badami and of the Pandyas. Even the Pandyas had to accept their overlordship briefly. Thus, by the middle of the 7th century AD, the Pallavas had set up a powerful regional kingdoms in South India. Their power began to weaken from the mid 8th century, when the Chalukyas were being replaced by the Rashtrakutas in the Deccan. By the early 10th century AD, the Pallava rule came to an end when Aparajit was defeated by Aditya Chola I. The Pandyas. The Pandyas come to light with King Kadungon towards the close of 6th century AD, when he suppressed the Kalabharas. The Pandyas ruled in the southernmost districts of the Tamil Nadu, with the Vagi river basin as the heartland of the kingdom. They constantly tried to extend their sway over the Kaveri Delta in the north and Sera countries, that is Kerala, in the southwest. Other powers. The Gangas continued to rule in the Gangavad in South Karnataka. Besides, there were several other small kingdoms and chieftains in the Deccan and South India at this time, such as the Nulambas, the Banas, the Silharas, etc. Unlike in northern India, there are no continuous stretches of river valleys and plains here. The major river valleys, such as the Raichur Doab between the Tungabhadra and the Krishna Godavari Delta, the lower Kaveri Valley, and the Vagi Valley, are separated from each other by rugged mountainous territories. Moreover, there were vast expanses of forests that divided cultivated zones. All this encouraged political fragmentation and allowed small political units to survive in isolated pockets of habitation. The above mentioned important river valleys could and did support greater kingdoms such as the Chalukyas of Badami, Raichur Doab, the Pallavas, Palar River Valley, and so on. But it was a difficult task for any one of the regional kingdoms to extend its sway over the rest, much more difficult than in the case of northern India. This comes out very clearly in the following account of the mutual conflicts of the Chalukyas, the Pallavas and the Pandyas. Conflicts between different powers. The political history of this period is marked by frequent wars between Chalukyas of Badami and the Pallavas, and between Pandyas and the Pallavas. Hostilities began with the raid of Chalukyas Pulakeshin II, who defeated Mahendravarman and occupied the northern part of Pallava kingdom. In another campaign, he vanquished the Banas, the feudatories of Pallavas in Rayalaseema, and once again threatened Kanchi. But he was badly defeated in several battles by Narasimhavarman I, who had succeeded Mahendravarman. Narasimhavarman then attacked the Chalukyas, captured Badami, and probably killed Pulakeshin II. The situation was saved by the latter's son, Vikramaditya I. He drove out the Pallavas, formed an alliance with the Pandyas, and repeatedly raided into Pallava territory. The reign of one of his successors, Vikramaditya II, is especially marked in this connection, for he is said to have overrun and looted Kanchi 3 times. Without going into details of particular wars and battles, we may note that the Pallavas had to engage in battles with the Pandyas too. It is remarkable that in these conflicts, it was always the Pallavas who were the target of attack. This was not just because they were situated between the Chalukyas and the Pandyas, but mainly because they were the most prosperous of all. It is significant that it was always the Chalukyas who attacked the Pallavas, and that the Pallavas concerned themselves mainly with driving them back into their territory. The only exception was the raid of Narasimhavarman I into Chalukyan kingdom and his occupation of its capital. But this was a retaliatory move and was made only once in the entire history of the conflict. Another time, Pallav Parameshwarvarman I launched an expedition into Chalukyan kingdom as a diversionary move. Parameshwaravarman wanted to get rid of the Chalukyan forces occupying his kingdom by diverting their attention. The same is true of the Pandyas, who fought repeatedly with the Pallavas for the control of the Kaveri Delta. The Sangam literature as well as the account of Hyun Sang suggests that the Vagai river valley, the core of the Pandyan kingdom, was relatively poor agriculturally. The Pandyas must have realized that if they wanted to be rich and powerful, they would have to control the rich Kaveri Delta. They seem to have fought the Pallavas with this purpose in mind, and by the early 9th century AD, they eventually came to control this area. The role of minor kings. The lesser kings and chieftains took part in the conflict of the regional kingdoms as subordinate allies of one or the other of these powers. Pulakeshin too had to subdue the Byanas, allies of the Pallavas, before attacking Narasimhavarman I. Similarly, Pallav General Uday Chandra engaged in battles with Savara king Udayan and Nishad chieftain Prithvi Vyagraha, who probably sided with the Chalukyas. These subordinate allies shared not only in the plunder but could add new areas to their realm as well. When we look at the smaller principalities individually, we do not find them worthy of attention. That is because each small kingdom by itself was insignificant, a non-entity. But taken together, they no doubt represent a political force to reckon with in affairs of the Deccan and South India. Equally striking is the inability of any king from the 4th to the 9th century AD to establish his hold over the Deccan and South India. For these 6 centuries, the political disunity was the norm despite the energetic efforts and ambitions of a number of kings. As already noted, the broken geography of southern India had a role to play here in political disunity as well as in the importance of lesser kings and chieftains. Other dimensions of political conflicts. An important offshoot of the Pallava Chalukya conflict was the emergence of the kingdoms of the Chalukya of Lata or South Gujarat. As a result of Narasimhavarman's occupation of Badami and the death of Pulakeshin II, there was terrible confusion and political disorder in the Chalukya kingdom. In the task of restoring unity to it and suppressing the hostile forces and of driving out the Chalukyas, Vikramaditya I had been greatly helped by his younger brother Jayasimhavarman. In return, Vikramaditya rewarded his brother by giving away South Gujarat to him. Relations with other countries. A noteworthy feature of South Indian politics at this time was an active interest in the political affairs of Sri Lanka. In the battles with the Chalukyas, we hear that Narasimhavarman I had a Lankan prince Maravarman on his side. He had been driven into exile and had sought refuge at the Pallava court. After his return from Badami, Narasimhavarman helped Maravarman to gain the throne at Anuradhapura by sending 2 naval expeditions. Later, when he had again been dispossessed of his kingdom, it was to the Pallava king that Maravarman looked for help. The Pandyas too showed keen interest in Sri Lanka, the wealth of which lured them into launching predatory raids into this area. The Pallavas seem to have taken interest in and somehow influenced the politics of Southeast Asia. It is possible that Nandivarman II, Pallava Mala, came from Southeast Asia to succeed to the Pallav throne in the mid-8th century. We also hear of the powerful fleet of Nandivarman III, and a Tamil record in Thailand mentions a Vishnu temple and a tank having one of his title. A more direct interference in South Asia, however, came only with the Cholas, who put an end to Pallava dominance in South India. Kerala seems to have continued under the rule of the Perumals in this period, although the details of the political history of the period are lacking. A famous ruler in this line was Cheraman Perumal, late 8th, early 9th century AD. He seems to have pursued his religion and religious policy in some extraordinary manner, so that the Jains, Christians, Saivites, and Muslims do not just praise him as a patron, but actually claim him as a practitioner of their own religion. The prosperity of Malabar constantly attracted invaders from outside. Not only the Pandyas claim to have vanquished Kerala, the same claim is also made by Narasimhavarman, a number of Chalukya kings, and later by the Rashtrakutas. Political organization. Let us briefly discuss the political organization of these kingdoms. The king and the highest stature of administration. We shall now proceed to discuss the patterns of administration that prevailed in these kingdoms. In theory, the king was the source of all authority. He assumed high sounding titles such as Maharaja, Bhatraka, Dharma Maharaja, Adhiraj, etc. In the beginning, kingship was governed by the Vedic ideal. We find kings proclaiming in their inscriptions that they performed horse sacrifices, Ashwamedh, and other Vedic sacrifices such as Vajpayee, Rajasuya, etc. During this period, these sacrifices did not have the social significance they had in the later Vedic period, but they had a special political meaning as they served to underline the independence of a particular king and justified his right to rule. Thus, Pulakeshin I, the founder of Chalukya kingdom, performed a horse sacrifice to mark the beginning of his dynastic rule. The same was done by many other kings gradually. However, as the religious milieu changed, the ideal of the kingship changed too, and the practice of making royal Vedic sacrifices fell into disuse. The king was helped by his ministers at the court. Members of the royal family, including the crown prince, Yuvraj, took an important part in running the government at higher levels. Then, there were a number of officials of various ranks who discharged various administrative duties in the name of the king. An important part of their job was to collect taxes. There was a principal tax on land, amount to 1/6 or more of the produce, in addition to a number of miscellaneous taxes such as those on weavers, draught cattle, marriage parties, and so on. Besides collecting taxes, the state officials maintained law and order and adjudicated cases of crime and civil disputes that came before them. Administrative units. The kingdom was divided into a hierarchy of administrative units. In the Deccan, these units were called Vishaya, Ahar, Rashtra, etc. From the 8th century AD, they developed a trend in the Deccan of dividing kingdoms into a hierarchy of the multiples of 10 villages. Less often, a district consisted of 12 villages. In the Pallava kingdom, the Nadu emerged as the main lasting unit of administration. The kings of this period realized the importance of agriculture, the revenue from which was the main basis of their wealth and strength. It is significant that Nadu, the basic political unit in Pallava and later in the Chola times, also meant arable land in contrast to Kadu, non-cultivable waste. Therefore, the state made all attempts to encourage the extension of agriculture. King Mayur Sarman of Kadamba dynasty is said to have brought vast tracts of virgin land to the Pallava by inviting Brahmins from afar. For probably the same purpose, a Pallava king gave away 1,000 ploughs. Moreover, as agriculture depended a great deal on irrigation in South India, the Pallavas took great interest in the provision and maintenance of canals, tanks, lakes, and large wells. Local associations. A characteristic feature of South Indian polity, especially Pallavan, was the importance of local trade units in most important aspects of the lives of Pallava people. There were innumerable local groups and associations based on caste, craft, professions, or religious persuasion. Thus, there were associations of handicraftsmen like the weavers, oil pressers, etc., of merchants like the Nana Desis, the Mani Gramam, and the 500 of a whole of the students of ascetics, of temple priests, etc. In addition, there were three important territorial assemblies, Ur, Sabha, and Nagaram. Ur was a non-Brahminical village assembly, Sabha was a village assembly consisting only of Brahmins, and Nagaram was an assembly where mercantile interest predominated. Nagaram had some agricultural interest too, however. The members of an assembly used to meet annually, while the day-to-day tasks were looked after by a smaller executive body. Each group functioned autonomously in accordance with its own constitution based on customs and usage, and took care of the problems of its members at the local level. In matters affecting people of more than one assembly or association, decision was taken by mutual deliberation. Local administration through the corporate units greatly lightened the burden of the government. It not only gave a chance to population to air its grievances and problems, but also fixed responsibility on the people themselves for redressing the grievances and solving the problems. This strengthened the basis of the state by minimizing opposition to it, as the people could not hold the government responsible for these matters. That is why we do not find the Pallava kings trying to encroach upon the functioning of the local autonomous corporate groups, but they did seek to strengthen their own base by bringing in Brahmins and creating privileged Brahman settlements by making land grants to Brahmins, either directly called Brahmadev or in the name of a temple called Devadana. These Brahman settlements were created all over the core areas of the Pallava kingdom. The core areas were the most prosperous areas based on irrigated rice cultivation, on the prosperity of which the strength of the Pallavas depended. As we have seen, the village assembly of Brahmins was called Sabha or Mahasabha. During the late Pallava period, the Sabha developed the system of governance through committees. This is known as the committee or the Varyam system. It became a hallmark of self-government in Brahman settlements in South India. The Sabha managed a number of tasks mostly through these committees: maintenance of tanks and roads, management of charitable donations and of temple affairs, and regulation of irrigation rights. In the Deccan, the role of local associations and assemblies was less conspicuous. In place of corporate institutions, it was the local notables called Mahajans who took part in local administration in villages and towns in Chalukya times. In villages, the Mahajans had a leader called Gamunda, headman. These notables did not enjoy the same kind of autonomy as was the case with the South Indian assemblies, but were closely supervised by state officials. Brahman settlements, however, were to be found all over the Deccan as well as in South India. We do not know precisely how the Brahmins in the Deccan managed their collective affairs, but since they were all a creation of kings and chiefs, they must have looked after the interest of the government in the locality. Relations between different categories of rulers. The relations between big kings and their lesser allies is a matter of controversy. Broadly, there are two views about the relations between powerful kings and minor kings and chieftains. First, it is said that smaller kings and chieftains regarded as big king, especially the Pallavas, as their overlord on religious grounds. The Pallava kings used to participate in elaborate religious ceremonies which gave them a high ritual status. It was this high ritual status that was respected by lesser kings and chiefs. This theory is not supported by historical evidence. It cannot explain how these minor kings could shift their respect from the Pallavas to the Chalukyas, or why they should stop respecting any high ritual status king in volatile political situations and declare their independence, or why they should again be made to respect the ritual status by force. The alternative view regards these smaller kings and chieftains as the feudatories of major powers, but feudatory is a technical term which stands for a special kind of relationship that existed in medieval Western Europe. We are not sure whether the same relation was there between the Pallavas or the Chalukyas and the lesser kings and chiefs. That is why we have preferred a neutral term, subordinate ally, to describe the relation of minor political powers with the major ones. Let us sum up. In this unit, you have learnt about the political situation in the Deccan and South India up to the mid 6th century AD. After this period, we find that the Chalukyas, Pallavas and the Pandyas were the major political powers in the region. There were certain minor powers also, but their role was not very significant. The major powers were constantly in conflict with each other, and the minor powers did side with one or other major powers during these conflicts. As far as the political organization is concerned, the king remained the central finger of administration and was held by other officials. A significant feature was the role of local administrations in the day-to-day administrative work.